We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Halfway to the Grave is the first book in Jeaniene Frost's urban fantasy romance series, the Night Huntress series. Since its release in 2007, it has been met with rave reviews. While I was still a teenager at the time of its initial release, by the time I became an adult, a wife, a mother, it was still making waves in the literary world. So, inevitably, I had the pleasure of discovering this gem. Quite frankly, Halfway to the Grave and the subsequent installments of the series are some of my favorite books to read. I get drawn in from the beginning and find it so hard to put down. I think that in this book, Frost introduces us to the Night Huntress world beautifully. Simply put, it is an amazing start to an amazing series. By the time we meet Kathleen Crawfield in the beginning of the book, she was 22 years old and already causing a ruckus in the Ohio vampire world. By this time, Kat has already been hunting for 6 years, ever since the age of 16 when her mother, Jeaniene, first shares with Kat that on the night of her conception, she was coerced into intimacy by a vampire. Demons, Jeaniene calls them, time and time again. Jeaniene claimed that she was taken advantage of by a monster. 5 months later, Kat was born into the world, kicking and screaming and looking exactly like that monster from that fateful night. Very early on, we understand that not only is there something special about Kat, but her life thus far has been marred by the circumstances surrounding her birth. No doubt about it, the hatred and resentment her mother carried from that night was not only evident in the way she treated Kat, but it was also evident in the way she looked at Kat. Eerily enough, Kat herself is driven by hate and disdain for vampire kind, her kind. Kat was a human-vampire hybrid. She was stronger than her peers, faster than her peers. Her vision and hearing, sharper. Alcohol doesn't affect her unless she drinks high concentrations and exceptionally high volumes, because, as you'd have it, her blood filters out alcohol and other toxins for that matter way faster than the human rate. It isn't much of a surprise that Jeaniene is okay with all of this. In fact, she endorses Kat going hunting night after night, constantly putting her life on the line, making herself bait by coyly baring her neck and dangling herself up as a fresh blood bag for non-suspecting vampires, until eventually they meet their demise at the end of her stake. This is how we meet Kat in the beginning of the book, doing her best to seem vulnerable, until she shreds the hearts of the vampire whom she just lured out of the club. This is also how Bones first spots Kat. Bones, our English leading man, is honestly shrouded in mystery in this book. We do not learn too much about him other than he is immediately enamored by our girl Kat and that he is a vampire bounty hunter. In fact, he was in the process of investigating the vampire that Kat finishes off at the start of the story, which is how he spots her in the first place. But once she pops up on his radar, Kat is there to stay. It isn't long before he convinces her to work with him. Yes, so that he can get close to her, but also because it's efficient. There is something alluring about Kat's skin to vampires. Something vampiric in nature about her skin that, paired with her human heartbeat, it makes her irresistible to vampires. Using that to their advantage, they can lure even more powerful vampires, master vampires who are a menace to the human race. Kat is distrustful of Bones at first. I mean, think about it. All her life, her mother has done nothing but instill in her mind that all vampires are evil, that they are all monsters, that even she, Kat, has evil deep within her. How can she trust that this vampire, Bones, is trustworthy enough not to turn on her? How can she trust that he is honorable enough to care about her well-being and the well-being of other innocent people? Soon, she begins to have feelings for Bones. Their relationship evolves just as much as Cat evolves as a huntress. Bones trains Cat to become faster, better, stronger, and more ruthless. He sharpens her knife-throwing skills and teaches her how to make more effective use of her legs. He increases her accuracy, flexibility, her endurance, and agility. They spar for hours and hours, and whenever Cat passes out, he would revive her with a few drops of his blood. Cat became a force to be reckoned with. As I stated before, their relationship begins to deepen as they begin to learn more and more about one another. Bones learns the extent of Cat's trauma. He learns that she had to grow up under the resentful gaze of her mother, who never failed to remind Cat of what she was. A half-breed, half a monster, liable to become evil simply because her mother believed there was evil in her. He learns that Cat was once open to love until her ex-boyfriend coerced her to share her body with him when she was not then ready to do so. He then not only went ghost on her, but she found him with another woman at the club. That was the night, in all her rage and fury, that Cat shriveled up her first vampire, and she hasn't looked back ever since. Naturally, Bones has some misgivings about all that he's learned. He even goes as far as to question her mother's judgment, which he and I certainly have that in common. Justina was definitely doing the most. In her training with Bones, Cat learned a lot about not just Nosferatu, but about how she was made. Bones suspects that her father was able to impregnate her mother simply because he was a newly formed vampire. Because it takes a few days for the body to fully transition into a vampire, he thinks that her father was still producing reproductive cells on the night of her conception. But Cat also learns a few things about Bones. She learns that he was born Crispin Philip Russell III to a lady of the night in England, and was raised in a house of ill repute by his mother at the grace of the madam. He ran errands for the women, and when his mother died of syphilis when Bones was just 17, he began servicing the madam's female clients. Unfortunately for Bones, he got caught stealing and was nearly hanged for his crime until one of his regulars intervened on his behalf, convincing the judge to send him to one of the new penal colonies in New South Wales instead. She learns that in 1790, at the age of 24, Bones set sail for what we know now as Australia on the ship the Alexander. While in Australia, he made friends with 3 other prisoners, Ian, Timothy, and Charles. One night, Ian manages to escape, but he returns a year later with natives. He returned a different man. He returned a vampire. Ian and the accompanying vampires quickly dispatch of everyone in the prison colony except for Bones, Timothy, and Charles. That night, Ian turns Bones, while Charles and Timothy are turned by other vampires. Bones remained in Australia with the natives until he returned to England 20 years later. While the madam was no longer living, the woman who intervened on his behalf was alive. He gifted her the gift of immortality. In the other books, we will come to know her as Annette. Cat soon learns that Bones was an amazing man, and soon their relationship turns sexual. Frost depicts their intimate relationship splendidly. Although their love scenes get very hot, very heavy, and sexy throughout the book, it is by far the main focus of the book. It isn't even the main focus of their relationship, but in their moments of passion, it never seems forced, and it never takes away from the pacing of the plot. Eventually, Bones reveals the reason that he is in Ohio in the first place, and that was because there was a string of disappearances that mirrored disappearances that Bones previously tracked in places like Maine and Mexico. Ohio, already a hotspot for all creatures of the supernatural variety due to a thinner veil between the normal and paranormal, made the disappearances of these women seem even more suspicious to Bones. We learn that Bones has been tracking this case for years now, and it has brought him here to Ohio, to a menacing vampire named Hennessy, to the corrupt governor, Ethan Oliver. But it's also brought him to Kat. So this is what Kat learns about the operation. Hennessy not only takes addicts and other undesirables off the streets, but he also takes young women who are not even high risk. Either way, he sells their bodies to humans first, to vampires for blood next, and once they've had their fill, the ghouls will purchase them, barely clinging to life, as meat for consumption. In the off chance that Hennessy and his men are not able to compel the family into believing that no crime has been committed, and the family in turn alerts the police or make a police report, I'm sorry to say, with the governor's backing, they are able to make those reports miraculously disappear, going no further. Because Kat is now a major part of Bones' life, she joins him in the fight to bring these women justice. Unfortunately, it now puts her on Hennessy's radar. Hennessy, in turn, sends his men out to Kat's house on the cherry orchard to brutally end the lives of her grandparents, and to also snatch her mother. This, I believe, is when Kat fully becomes immersed into this life. No longer is she anonymous. Now, her actions have consequences. Unfortunately for her, those consequences trickle down to the people in her life whom she is closest to. Undoubtedly, Kat is hurt, heartbroken, and those feelings will eventually be what drives her from this point on. The people who slaughtered her grandparents and took her mother leave behind instructions for our two lovers, and Kat, wanting to save her mother, has no choice but to agree to a meeting. Before the meeting, though, Bones fills up on blood and subsequently gorges Kat on his blood. Feeding on his blood made Kat even stronger than what she was, even faster. It made her hearing enhanced, her vision sharper, and when it came time for the meeting, she was humming with so much power that she had to make a conscious effort to bite it back. When she first gets there, she leans into the fear that she has for her mother to mask that she is a threat. Because despite what her mother has done and how her mother has treated her over the years, Kat loves her mother. She does not want to lose her. Not like this. Not after she has already caused her grandparents' demise. Needless to say, their entire plan works. Kat is able to convince the den of vampires that she is not a threat until she eventually unleashes the Red Reaper upon them. She stormed the house, ready to defend her mother and bring her to safety. Snarling from her throat and with blazing green eyes, she flung silver knives at unearthly speeds. All that rage and fury she kept controlled since she saw what became of her grandparents, well, all that rage and fury was brought to the forefront and she let it consume her. Bones, taking advantage of the distraction, started dispatching of the vampires nearest to him, while Kat continued to gift vampire after vampire with silver to the heart. No vampire in that room was prepared for Kat's speed, allowing her to free her mother and protect her retreat. These are some of my favorite scenes in the entire book. Frost executes the action here in such a way that I cannot tear my eyes from the pages. In my opinion, these are some of the best action scenes in the entire series, but I digress. When sirens rang in the distance, the vampires left began to scatter. That's when Kat spots Hennessy and one of his henchmen fleeing the scene. She catches up with Hennessy, lands on him, and then he immediately goes for her throat. Because one of her arms were now pinned, she decides to use her only free hand to finish him off. The only problem with that is now, Hennessy has access to Kat's neck, which he takes advantage of. But as his fangs sink into her throat, Kat uses that free hand to sink her silver blade through Hennessy's heart. She stabs repeatedly, digging deeper and harder until Hennessy became dead weight on top of her. When Kat saw his henchman getting away, she yells to Bones to follow him, which he does. Bones going after the henchman gives Kat the opportunity to go after the corrupt governor and dispatch of him. However, them separating allows the police to arrest Kat and detain her. Detained in her hospital room, Kat is paid a visit by Donald Williams and Tate Bradley. Don heads a division of the FBI called the Paranormal Behavior Division. He informs her that his division investigates unnatural occurrences of homicides, and that Tate has been training to head a new unit of soldiers to fight a very special battle, to fight the war that has been waged under human noses for centuries, the war against vampires. He has been investigating as well as scientifically researching the vampire phenomena for decades. He knows that Kat's mother reported an assault 22 years ago, and that report stated that the attacker drank her blood. 5 months later, Kat was born, and her pathology report shows that she has the same genetic mutation in her blood that vampires have. So now, Don wants her to consider his offer. He wants Kat. It's clear she hunts vampires, so they have similar interests. Besides, vampires would now be looking for her. Kat's anonymity was ruined, but he can fix that. The charges brought against her will not be a problem because Catherine Caulfield will die, on paper of course, and she can be reborn into her new life. She would be given backing, troops to train. She would become a weapon of the U.S. government against vampires. Next, Don brings in Kat's mother, Jeaniene, and her mother's eyes are filled with betrayal. She is angry and disgusted, not only because her parents are now dead, but because by the looks of Kat and Bones when they came to rescue her, it was clear that her daughter has been canoodling with the enemy. But Kat tells her mother that Bones is not like other vampires. There is good in him. She declares that her mother is wrong about Bones. He is no monster. If spending the last few months with Bones taught Kat anything, it was that vampirism was not synonymous with evil. But her mother, as stubborn as ever, will not be swayed in her assessment of him. In fact, she goes on to blame Kat's involvement with Bones for the deaths of her parents. But that's not true. Jeaniene has known all along that Kat has been hunting vampires since she was 16, not just these past 5 months with Bones. So the dangers were always there. Her mother encouraged her to do this. And if anyone has her grandparents' blood on their hands, it's the both of them, Kat and her mom. Jeaniene goes on to threaten that if Kat continues to see Bones, she never wants to see her again. She says that she knows Bones has corrupted Kat, that he has corrupted her conscience, that he has turned her to evil and has brought out the darkness that Jeaniene always knew was inside of her. She was always afraid this would happen. She hopes that the police finds him and finishes him. As you can imagine, these words hurt Kat to her core. Don tells Kat that he knows her only choice is to now take her mother and run, with or without her vampire lover. With everything that's happened tonight, Kat would have to run. She has made enemies. But it's clear to us and Kat that her mother would never run away with Bones. Jeaniene has not accepted who Kat is, what she does, and who she does it with. She never would. In order to run with Bones, Kat would have to leave her behind. And if Jeaniene is left behind, she would be tracked down and hurt, used against Kat, killed. But if she took her mother against her will, Kat knew her mother would do everything in her power to fight and escape them, further endangering both her and Bones. Kat was defeated. She thinks now that there is only one way to ensure the safety of both her mother and Bones, the two people she loved most in this world. She had to take Don's offer. Don had a deal. Kat's conditions? She commands any team in the division that hunts vampires. They do things her way. She picks and trains them how she sees fit. And if they do not meet her standards, they are gone. The second condition? They have to leave right away, and Don has to forget about Bones. Don, wanting to win the entire war and not just one battle, was certainly not fixated on Bones, so he agreed to Kat's conditions, provided that she never has any contact with him ever again. They further iron out the kinks of their agreement, things such as length of service, how many missions a year, etc., etc. But at the end of the conversation, there was no qualms about it. Kat was now working for the government, and they would provide protection for her and her mother. Kat had one final stipulation, though. She would only go after vampires who were hurting humans. She knows by experience that not all vampires go around harming humans unnecessarily. She will only go after killers, not sippers. And with that, Don introduces Tate to his new team leader, Kat. Sometime later, after a successful extraction to a Houston area hospital, Justina is relieved to have Kat away from Bones. And Kat, well, she is simply heartbroken, wondering if Bones yet found the Dear John letter she left him. The official story was, after killing Governor Ethan Oliver in a random senseless act of violence, she died trying to escape custody during a military transfer on the highway. That night when Kat slept, she dreamt of Bones' voice, of something he told her, promised her months ago when their romantic relationship first started. He promised her that if she ran from him, he will chase her and he will find her. Infuriating, isn't it, that Kat runs away from Bones when us, the reader, and even Kat deep down knows that Bones will never let her go. We know that Bones will come for her. The only question is when.